We'll call the meeting to order. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Sonia, would you mind roll call?
Yep, Commissioner Diphil,
Here.
Commissioner Wire,
Here.
Commissioner Corbin,
Here.
Commissioner Shaw,
Here.
Mayor Lindsay.
Here. And before we adopt the agenda, I want Sonia to address why you have a copy in front of you.
There is one item on the minutes that was a typo from the original. It's under the personnel for consent. There was an individual whose wage was recited higher than what you actually approved. And so what you have in front of you is the correction.
So there was a correction in this. So do we have a motion to adopt the agenda as corrected?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Appearances and acknowledgements. South Dakota Public Broadcasting has selected Madison as one of the featured communities on Dakota Life Show for 2023-24 season. And so within the next year and that, there should be people coming around, talking to business people and that, and putting that story together. Under consent calendars, anything anyone wants removed from the consent calendar? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve consent calendar.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under unfinished business, 5:30 public hearing, proposed resolution 22-54 declare necessity for sidewalk improvement. And Jameson, do you want to address that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we noted during the last meeting, this is the annual hearing to look at the areas for sidewalk improvements for next year. So these are the spots in town which we'd be installing new sidewalk that has not had it in the past. The resolution is the same as was shared at the last meeting. We did receive a couple pieces of resident feedback, which was included in the agenda packet for review. Ryan had to be out of town for this evening, but he's generous enough to spend some time with us via Zoom. Ryan, would you have anything to add to resolution 22-54?
No, I don't think so, unless there are some questions about the two landowner concerns. I can kind of address some of the things that were in those.
I'd say one of the things that was in both was on the timeline for implementing the improvements for next year. Can you go over generally how our timeline works when we get started, when the landowners have to have them complete, et cetera?
Yeah, so that deadline is in July. We acknowledge that July deadline is fairly tight. So we typically tell people that if they need more time, we could grant an extension up until the weather permits. And we realize there are a lot of contractors that are very busy and it can be tough to get on schedule in that time frame. So a landowner has a few different options for that sidewalk installation. They can choose to do the work themselves, hire their own contractor to complete the work, or they've always got the option to have the city hired contractor to do that. We typically receive very competitive prices through our bid process. So if a landowner didn't elect to try to find their own contractor and get that, they could certainly utilize ours. But that July deadline is when it's supposed to be completed, but it's typical for us to grant extensions.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to address this topic? Okay. Seeing none, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-54, declaring necessity for sidewalk improvements 2023.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Approved resolution number 2022-54, declare necessity for sidewalk improvement 2023. Again, Ryan, do you want to address this or Jameson?
This would be the same resolution. Yeah, I think we've got that covered.
We've got in here twice, because one of them
One's a-
usually,
One's
a
public
hearing.
hearing and one's
Hearing.
listed.
yes,
Yeah.
okay. So do we have a motion to approve?
I feel like I already did
I think you just did that.
We did that.
Number 3, approve second reading of ordinance 1654, adopting and enacting the city of Madison codification. You wanna address that?
Yep, so this would be the final approval of the recodification effort, which has been going on for well over a year, probably a year and a half or so. City engaged with Unicode to complete that service for the city. It gets done every probably 10 years or so. So this recodification would take all ordinances that have been passed since the last recodification, implement them into the new book per se. And then also it compares the ordinance with state law that might have changed over the last 10 years and any other changes that might be needed as far as an organizational structure. There have been no changes since the first reading and staff recommends approval.
Questions or comments?
What are we gonna do ongoing now that we've got this updated? Do we have to contract with Unicode or do we have some sort of ongoing contract with them?
We already did that when we approved the original codification, that is an ongoing service that we've contracted for.
One nice thing is that Unicode is now owned by Civic Plus, who is the company that does our website. So now the website, which also of course houses city ordinances, same company, and they work well together for that public interaction of ordinances.
Just don't wanna have to go back like we've done here for the last year and a half and redo all this.
Yeah, someday again, a recodification will need to be done to look again at state laws and other changes that need to be made to make sure we're up to date. But we hope that the new ordinance as presented online will be easy to use and can be versatile to incorporate new ordinances into it as well.
So assuming we approve this, it'll be active 20 days from today.
20 days from publication, which we'll probably have in the paper by Thursday. So we'd be looking at 3 weeks approximately after this Thursday, first week of January or so.
Motion to approve the second reading or adopt and enact the city of Madison codification.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under new discussion or new business, discussion and action related to liquidated damages on the RD Phase 2 and 9th Street Union Avenue improvement projects. And that, Weston, did you want to address that?
All right, thank you, Mayor. And seated background on this item is same as the last meeting where you talked about phases 1A and 1B of the RD project. Now we're going to be discussing phase 2 for RD as well as the SRF project 9th and Union. Tonight, we're looking for discussion, direction, and action to direct staff how you'd like to see us proceed with closing out some of these contracts and moving forward with liquidated damages without. And then you would be receiving change order for a future commission agenda to codify that action. Weston, please.
Okay, I think Northwest 9th Street's the first in my packet, probably is the first in yours as well. So we'll just start with Northwest 9th Street. Again, like Jameson said, this letter was prepared by Banner, addressed to the city, and it's a review of the contract completion dates, the project status, and discussion of potential actions that the commission can take on this contract. So for Northwest 9th Street, which is Winter Contracting as a contractor, phase 1 of this project had a milestone date. Phase 1 would be identified by Northwest 9th Street from Highland Avenue to Chicago Avenue. That milestone date or completion date was October 28th, 2022. This project has 2 substantial completion dates. They're both in 2023. So the portion of 9th Street west of Josephine, the completion date is August 11th, 2023. The portion of 9th Street east of Josephine, that substantial completion date is September 15th, 2023, with a final completion date of the project of October 6th, 2023. I've got liquidated damages listed for each criteria there with the milestone, substantial completion, and final completion listed in the letter here. A little bit of the discussion of the status of the project that's indicated below. I'll just read that aloud. So this project was bid June 30th of this year. A pre-construction meeting was held on August 2nd. with construction beginning on September sixth. Between that pre-construction meeting and construction beginning September sixth, there was some design changes made. There's some value engineering performed primarily on the utilities on the project, realignment of a water main, and then also some modifications of the storm sewer system. The modifications of the storm sewer did result in some delays for those storm structures to be manufactured. On top of that, the contractor did have some delays with underground utilities, and we've discussed that already at previous meetings. Another item in there, once the utilities were completed November 3rd, it was fairly evident that the conventional methods of road construction were not going to be possible, being that late in the season. The commission did approve moving forward with an alternate roadway section. And that temporary surfacing was put down on November 6th, or sorry, the alternative roadway section was reconstructed or used. And the roadway was temporarily surfaced November 16th, 2022. And the site was prepared for the winter and open for traffic. So this project did not meet the criteria that was required to consider the milestone reached. And that's the action or non-action that we're discussing tonight. I've got two potential options listed below. And like Jameson said, we're just looking for direction on how to address this with the contractor. The first one would be to take no action and reserve the right to assess liquidated damages in the future. That would be no action on the contract, leave the dates as they are. I still would recommend that the commission consider a winter shutdown agreement. That way we can control that or ensure that no construction is going to take place outside of the appropriate weather conditions that we would want to see it done. The other option that I've listed here or potential action would be to modify this milestone date for phase 1 of the project. Change that date to a date of 2023. So I'm recommending June 15th, 2023. I've discussed this with the contractor and they feel that they'd be able to complete the work necessary to reach that milestone by that June 15th date. I'd also recommend that the commission do a shutdown agreement with the contractor in this scenario as well. And then if the date is not met or if the milestones are not met, you could consider assessment of liquidated damages at that time. Any questions, clarifications needed?
Ryan, are you still on?
I am, yes.
Would you have anything to add?
Weston and I discussed this earlier today, and my recommendation aligns with his. I think we were looking at that option B there. We think changing that milestone completion date on the project to allow that in 2023 is reasonable. That resets the contract dates and expectations. So they'll know what our new expectations are with this change. And so that's the route I would like to see us go.
Are we able to adjust that amount? The liquidated damages amount daily?
So we had that question at the previous commission meeting. I did not reach out and ask RD if we can adjust those amounts. David, I don't know if you'd have any input on that. Can, liquidated damages on a contract, adjusting those values to a modified amount if you're going to modify dates on contract.
I'd want to look at the contract before I got too far out over my skis. So I'm inclined to not go there as a gut reaction. And I'd have some questions about how much authority we have there, but I'd want to look at the contract documentation for that issue, and I have not done.
If my memory is correct, Weston, these dollars were set at the beginning of the contract and approved by RD.
Yeah, in this specific one, it would have been DANR with the state. Then they may not have had as much input on the front end of this contract. Of course, Banner wasn't involved on the front end of this contract, but it is a standard EJCDC contract that's very widely used. I have discussed this with a couple other senior engineers at Banner following that question from last meeting. And they don't have experience with modifying the value of the liquidated damages after the contract is signed.
So this could be a learning opportunity.
It could be, we could use it as that.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I guess my position is, we had contributions in this delay and as well as other underground utilities people, so I would recommend going with the second option there as well.
Would you want to make that as a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion when we go with option B. To change the milestone completion date to June 15th, 2023.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay,
Next project for discussion is phase 2 of the rural development projects. And Almy Inc. is the contractor on this project. Jeff Almy with Almy Inc. is in attendance tonight. I'll go through the letter that was sent to the city or prepared by Banner. And certainly let Jeff give some input if he feels like he wants to. So a review of the contract dates. We did have interim completion dates on this project, an interim completion date for 9th Street. And that would have been 9th Street from Washington to Prairie, and then also 8th Street from Egan to Egan. Those interim completion dates had been modified on the contract once prior. The completion dates are October 20th, 2022 and October 25th, 2022 respectively. Substantial completion on date on this project is October 6th, 2022 with a final completion date of November 15th, 2022. And I've listed out the liquidated damages associated with each one of those completion dates as well. The actual completion dates that have been recorded for this project, the interim completion date on Northeast 9th Street was October 4th, 2022. The completion date of Northeast 8th Street was October 25th, 2022. And substantial completion has been met on this project, and that date's been recorded as December 8th, 2022. In the discussion on this project, they have met all of the completion requirements via the contract or per the contract, except for the final completion. There has been a working day count that's accumulated from that initial completion date for 9th Street of August 20th. And that date counts continued since that October 20th date. I've presented in this letter 3 potential actions that could be taken on the contract or direction that could be given to move forward with the contractor. One would be to take no action as far as not change the completion dates on this contract. In that case, we would recommend a winter shutdown to pause the working day count and then continue that working day count when weather allows for construction next season. Another potential option would be to change the interim and the substantial completion dates to correspond with when the work was actually completed. That would essentially change the completion date of 9th Street to October 4th, 8th Street to October 25th, and the substantial completion to December 8th. In this scenario or option, we would recommend that a shutdown still be agreed upon, and on a final completion date, that would be extended to a time next year where the work could be completed next season. And we're recommending a date of June 15th, 2023. Another option that I presented here is to modify the interim and substantial completion dates to correspond with when the work was completed, but to keep the final completion date as is or as the contract states, and reserve an option to reevaluate this working day count and potential liquidated damages when the work is completed next season.
Ryan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so of these options, I believe option 3 is the reasonable option. change that interim and substantial completion dates on the project to correspond with the documented dates the work was completed. Not do a change to the final completion date, and begin a working day count for assessment of LDs when the weather is appropriate in the 2023 season. That would allow us the flexibility to leave the dates as they are as far as the final and decide what's fair and reasonable at the end. Emphasis is really on substantial completion this year, and they reached that. Reason for potentially some LDs is because we're going to be going into an additional construction season and may have some costs related to construction administration. But we may be able to come to a resolution at the end that no LDs are warranted. But I would just kind of like to leave that as it is and determine what's right at the end.
Questions or comments?
What's still left to do on that project?
The remainder is a list of punch list items. There's boulevard restoration yet to be completed. There is going to be some repair of some concrete work, and that was identified even further back in the summer, some repair that was necessary. Of course, we didn't have time to complete a walkthrough on Prairie Avenue because it was completed so late. So we want to do a walkthrough on that portion of work and generate a punch list to make sure that that gets repaired. If there are any issues, they get repaired prior to the final closeout.
Other questions?
Why'd we not make our deadlines
On this project specifically.
The reason I ask on this one specifically is we set those deadlines because we wanted to have these roads done before school started.
Mhm.
And then it didn't happen, and it created a lot of frustration in the community. I mean, we went out of our way as a city to get that part of the project done before school started, and that didn't happen.
Mhm.
I felt like we had an ideal construction season, so I'm a little baffled.
You know, I agree with that. The roadways were completed prior to those dates, are very close to them. I don't have the specific date on when the roadway is completed. I think the concrete work behind that with the sidewalks and driveways, the contractor was working on other portions of the project and didn't have enough resources to complete that specific work. And Jeff, maybe, I don't know if you can speak to that at all.
Yeah, there's a couple things that one of them you guys probably.
Jeff, if you wouldn't mind coming up here closer to the speaker for those people who are on their computers at home, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple things I want to make sure everybody remembers on here too, is we did have a delay from Northwestern with the gas lines in the street that caused quite a delay for us on the doing that work, and then pushed all that work at a temporary surface and then do the work the next year. So it kind of, yeah, that was a big part of getting things pushed back. And the other thing is the concrete availability this year was terrible. Kind of something that's out of everybody's hands, I guess. There's a shortage of cement, and it caused a lot of, all throughout the construction world this year it made it tough to meet schedule because it just couldn't get concrete. But both of those things we sent out in a letter in September asking for an extension time. And so we've addressed those, and we'd like to have those considered.
Other questions?
Didn't help, we had to tear out concrete after we poured it up there too. And that puts you behind, I'm sure, as well.
Any other questions? Ryan, anything more?
No, I think, between Jeff and Weston, they kind of covered it there, and Adam mentioned the rework. Those kinds of things take quite a while to pull out that concrete, especially right before paving. It was very challenging to try to get that all done ahead of the paving schedule. And Those were just kind of the typical delays that we had seen. Jeff is right. There was challenge getting cement. There were days they wanted to pour and couldn't. So I can verify that that's absolutely correct.
You're recommending C,
Correct.
Yes.
which would, we would still be looking at liquidated damages, but at a reduced rate, and then we'd have a winter shutdown.
Winter shutdown, and that thought would be is the, the final completion date of November 15th. Well, working day count wouldn't begin until next
Work
season.
resumes this spring.
Right, so the working day count would be 0. Once work continued next spring, it would start day 1 and continue until the work was completed. And we believe that gives the city the most flexibility to negotiate with Homey on one, holding some leverage to complete the work. And then determining what is fair and reasonable, like Brian said, when Homey does get that work completed, the commission can then assess this again and determine how they want to fulfill the contract.
Are there any hiccups you're seeing to finish this thing up, or do you think it'll go pretty quick once weather cooperates?
So there isn't a whole lot, just, punch list items that are left. So I don't anticipate anything at this point. I mean, there is some concrete that needs to be poured. Hopefully the concrete cement situation develops in our favor through this next spring, but that's something we don't have a lot of control over either, so. But that's, as far as what I can see now, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to complete it in the time.
On a positive note, I was impressed in the fact that you got that entire prairie done. I really was, and the concrete guys that were there really did a nice job, and you need to know that as well. Yeah, you're behind schedule, I get it, but they really did a good job on prairie, and I think you need to pass that back as well.
Yeah, thank you.
I put a spin on it.
Other questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we go with the staff recommendation of letter C. And move forward from there.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. All right. Number 2, approve first reading ordinance number 1655. Amend appropriation ordinance number 1640 for fiscal year 2022. And I'm gonna ask Jameson to address that.
Ordinance 1655 is a ordinance, supplemental ordinance to this year's budget. It's customary at the end of each year that we're gonna have some line items, many that we have out there, that are gonna be going over budget. So Ryan presented this ordinance. She can answer questions on any of the specifics, changes that we see in here. I will note that even though it's a supplemental appropriation of $296,000, that does not mean that we are over budget by $296,000. I don't believe we're over budget at all. But when we are required to be amending line items at the end of the year, there's always gonna be some that are over, and all of our other line items are under budget at this point. So anything to add, Simon?
As of right now, general fund actually sits about 3.6 million under budget overall. It's just individual departments that are for various reasons. There's a couple of the items that you approved earlier in the year, construction items that now get wrapped up or tied into this, like the additional roof on the community center. Other than that, most of them are relatively small, and it has to do with wages and stuff and increases over the last year. So.
I'll accept the mayor and commission.
Yeah.
Let's get that out a little bit.
And just to, understand a little bit further in that, when you set a budget out 15 months in advance, then that it's very difficult to make sure that everything comes in the way it's supposed to. And as an example, where we're sitting right now, if you look outside, our snow budget, we'll see what next year brings with the snow budget. If this here is the final finale of how much snow we're gonna get, or if we're gonna keep going toward the 50 inches that are predicted. So, so this is a standard at the end of the year. Questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
At a duress.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 3, approve the community center amended and restated cooperative use agreement with Dakota State University. And again, I'll ask Jameson to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The original cooperative use agreement between DSU or the state really and the city was approved in the year 2000. So we have been operating under that original agreement for the past 22 years. For many of those years, it did work well and served its purpose. But I think the community center in particular found during the COVID crisis and since then as well with some financial issues that there are changes that are needed to the cooperative use agreement. My understanding is that there's been talk about changing this for several years. Certainly since I've been on here, it was one of the first things that I learned. And I would say over the past about 12 months, we've worked closely with DSU to draft up some new language, which ultimately is what is before you today. In order to approve the amended and restated cooperative use agreement, it requires the approval from both the South Dakota Board of Regents through DSU as well as the city of Madison. The Board of Regents approved it on their end. I can see either last week or the week before. The motion they made was to approve it in substantially the same form. So if there are any minor changes that are needed to be made, we can still make that. And it would not have to go back to the Board of Regents. Anything substantial, of course, would change it more than that motion would allow. The primary changes and clarifications that you will find in this amended and restated cooperative use agreement is related to the 3 different entities or individuals that really oversee the community center. First, I'll make note of the 4-person board. That is the informal term. The formal name in the old agreement is the Budget and Personnel Committee. So this agreement would change the name of that committee to be the governing board. The membership does not change. The 4 people on that board are the mayor, the finance officer, and then from DSU, the president and the VP for business and administration, which would be Stacy Kruzmark. Stacy was unable to make it tonight. He did send formal communication that the DSU is supportive of this, and they've been collaborating with this on us for some time. So those 4 individuals would be the new governing board, which is essentially the 2 owners coming together to have the final say in the facility. That group would be responsible for hiring the director, approving the budget, setting rates, and providing overall guidance. The second group on that 3-legged stool would be an advisory committee. This committee is currently called the governing board, so there could be some confusion there as we're changing terms. But the new term for that group would be the advisory committee. It would still be made up of 5 city appointees and 4 DSU appointees, and largely it's a group of volunteers that are providing valuable insight and feedback not only to the 4-person board, the new governing committee, but also to the director of the community center. They'll be able to help formulate policies and changes to propose to the director or to the governing board directly if desired. And they can review the budget, look at rate changes, hours programming, really any policy or item that they would like to consider, they could certainly look at. And then the final leg on that stool is the community center director. So this is a full-time staff to provide professional services for the community center. In the previous agreement, this position was hardly ever mentioned. In the new one, we want to make it clear who over what that person is responsible for and who they report to. So this person will be managing the day-to-day operation, overseeing staff, preparing the budget, and is generally going to be the go-to person for the advisory board as well as for the 4-person board. Some items will still need to be approved by the governing board, but the director is going to have more flexibility and authority to do some of the day-to-day actions that are needed for the facility. Other changes or things that are not changed, I should say, some more significant items are the city and DSU are still contributing to any shortfalls on a 60-40 split, with the city contributing 60% and DSU contributing 40%. It's also clarifying that DSU is going to be contributing a per credit hour fee in return for their students receiving memberships, and that'll be a positive addition for the community center budget. I think I'll stand by there and answer any questions anybody may have.
Questions or comments from the commission?
Who will the director report to? How does that work?
Officially, the director and Jean is here with us tonight. We'll be reporting to the four-person board. They will have the ability to hire and do any personnel items for the director. Informally, the director works pretty closely with myself as a city liaison. All employees for the community center are and will continue to be city employees. And so it's important for him to have some close contact with the city. For example, I've been doing Gene's performance reviews and I meet with him on a monthly basis, just like I do all of our other department heads. But he would be officially reporting to that four-person board, now being called the governing board.
And that really isn't a change from the past. It just wasn't spelled out in the past like it is now. So, Gene, is there anything more that you'd like to add?
You want to come up there?
Please, yes, for the benefit of those who didn't know.
Not really. I think he outlined it very well. I think our current arrangement, the four-person board made the final decision regardless. Even if the current governing board and myself maybe had different philosophies on moving things forward. And again, this has been a little bit of a learning curve for me. Again, I've only been here a year, although 12 years ago I was at DSU, so I have a little bit of a working knowledge of it. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't see a big change because the current advisory board, if that's what ends up being decided, I mean, they're very invaluable in providing the direction needed. This isn't a one-man show. It's a collaboration with DSU, the city, and I'm just kind of the I guess the pivot point to make sure we're moving that community center forward. So I guess that in a nutshell, that's the way I view it.
And I'm gonna open up to anyone else in the audience that has any questions or concerns. Jenny?
I think I know most of you, but for some people that are watching on Zoom, I'm Jenny Thompson. I've lived in Madison for about 35 years. I've been on the community center board for 5 years. I've been a member of the community center for about 16-ish years. I'm leaving my term early because I have some family issues to deal with, and I just don't have the time to dedicate to the board that I would like to. Gene was right when he said that there was different philosophies between some of the board members and him. I had a different philosophy. I'm very, very concerned about the direction that the community center is going. I've had people from the community approach me at work, at the center. They're concerned. I think they would like to be heard. I'm just really concerned that the voice of the members is going to be lost with all of this in the transition. I'm glad to see that the four-person board is going to be an open meeting now, because in the past it hasn't been. So I do plan to attend those meetings when my schedule allows. I did email the commissioners today about another concern that I had with issues going on at the community center, and I've just asked that be put on the agenda for your next meeting so that the public can come and the instructors can come and discuss that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Commissioners?
Well, we've been talking about changing that agreement for a long time. There are definitely some advantages with DSU bringing in some kind of student money in lieu of memberships, if you will. I like to see that. It is nice to straighten out that relationship between the four-person board and the governing board. I think it's an appropriate thing to do.
Well, and from the state standpoint, if you take a look at any of the other organizations in the state, the four-person board is not something that's listed out there as being a standard committee that actually oversees the total operation. Governing board is more the standard talk, and having been involved with it for 7 years in that, basically what I see in here is the clarification of the director's duties and the changing of the titles of what each of the groups has done to bring it more into alignment with what is expected of other groups within the state of South Dakota and within cities. So the four-person board has been the governing board. They have had the final say in the years past. and the governing board, as it was titled in the past, was an advisory board. And so I just see the realignment of the titles, bringing it more into line with what's expected and anticipated to meet the guidelines throughout the state of South Dakota. Other questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
I maybe have one more question, I guess, more so probably for Jenny, so. What in this agreement exactly are you afraid of, or?
I'm not saying that changes that need to be
Jenny,
made.
Jenny, would you please, for
I'm
the
sorry.
people that are listening, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm not saying that changes did need to be made to the agreement, because I think that some of those were made and there were good changes that needed to be made to clarify some things. But I'm just concerned that some of these people that are on the committee, not necessarily the 4-person committee, but the advisory committee, I think is the new name for it, aren't active members of the community center. They may be Madison City, members of the city of Madison, not necessarily community center members. And I'm afraid that some of the things that I see on a daily basis going on up there, some of the classes that I feel are important, that I see people attend, are going to be taken away because somebody on that board doesn't understand the importance of that. They're more looking at it from a different perspective. I would love to see that board, the advisory committee, be 3 people from the city, 2 people from DSU, and 2 active members, so that everybody's interest is considered when decisions are being made.
You get 5.
Yes, 5 appointees.
They're required to be.
We don't have requirements for membership. I think everybody, I mean, you're the board that appoints them. I think there's a lot of common sense in making sure that there's people who are involved in it. Sonia and I have discussed a lot, and we'd love to make sure that we have somebody who represents kind of the fitness side of the world, the recreation side, after school program, make sure we've got some breadth. To my, our current appointees are, but I guess I can't say that.
There's also a difference between being a member and being an active member.
I think that it's important for every member to be represented, and if you want to have a membership and just come to the community center for whatever the case is, I think members do personally.
Thing we have to look at too is these are volunteer positions, so when we appoint someone, it's because they have volunteered to be a part of that committee. And as we can see, with the other boards and that we have, there are people who want to be involved, and there are people who maybe are very active members of that choose not to be members of the board. So this isn't something that we're going to go out and we're going to appoint someone that has nothing to do with it. This is where we ask for people to volunteer to be on these boards. And usually if they don't have an interest in the community center or any of the other organizations, they don't volunteer for it.
In my term, or pretty sure with 2 or 3 years, I put it hours per year doing this because I'm passionate about it. And I just don't have the time and the energy, and I feel like I'm fighting an uphill battle. So that's the decision that I made for myself and for my family. So, thank you.
Other questions?
The employee voice or the member voice, what reference that, how is that changing, or, I'm sorry.
Second word up. So I'm there 5 or 6 days a week. I go to class every morning. Kelly used to go to that class, but he got lost somewhere. So I see how valuable these classes are to the people that attend these classes. There might be 2 people in a class. There might be 12 people in that same class the next day. It just depends what people have going on in their lives. And age they're trying to make to the instructors, and the instructors are not happy. And they tried to voice that, and they're not being heard. They came to me, they're upset, they're texting me back and forth. They don't want these changes to be made. And they come and talk to me because they feel comfortable talking to me, and they know that their voice is going to be heard. Does that help answer your question? Where,
In a
let's just-
sense, but in a sense, not really. Because what you're addressing right now is not in this agreement. That is within the administration of what's, proposed.
right, but I'm just saying, if you had two fully active members, and I don't know how you would define that were on this board, they would make sure that, hey, I'm in this class and this is important to me, so I'm gonna make sure that my voice is heard in this. Whereas if you have somebody that's like, hey, I just got kids and I come and pick my kids up from the after school program, they're not gonna know what's going on in athletics. And they're not gonna know what's going on in the classes. I don't know what's going on with the after school program or the summer program because I don't have kids that are involved in that.
One of the things in that I would suggest, and that is that, if you see someone you think that should be involved, please ask them to volunteer.
I've done that, and
Very good.
there was a lady that came to my office the other day, an elderly lady. And those elderly ladies are very upset with some of the things that are going on. And I said, okay, I'm listening to you, I hear you. I think you should talk to Jean, you should write a letter to the commissioners, do what you need to do. And I, there was a meeting that was held. I don't necessarily know what the outcome of that was. I don't know that they were happy with the answer that they got, but they're afraid they're gonna lose their instructor from their class. They've talked about, they're upset. They didn't want to get on the board because they don't have the time and they're a snowbird, so they're gone for part of the year. But
And
I'm just
again-
saying that. I'm
And
just,
again, I totally understand where you're at in that, but outside of this agreement between the city and the state,
to a certain extent,
that is an administration suggestion that you're referring to. And it really is not reflected in what we're dealing with.
to an
here.
extent, I feel it is, because right now you're talking about 5 city people, 4 DSU people.
That hasn't
My
changed.
suggestion was 3 city people, 2 DSU people, and 2 active members, whether they be county residents, city residents, DSU professors that live out of town, I don't know, somebody that's there 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week.
And indeed, that could be what ends up being part of the board. It's just that in here, it just specifies 5 and 4.
I understand that,
Yeah,
but it says DSU, it says city. Is what I'm saying.
Correct. But if we were to try to get as specific as you would like to be, we may not get anything filled. That.
Well, I think they're filling it now, if I understand correctly, but I'm not here to argue. I'm just saying that
No.
I'm very concerned with the direction of the community center, and that's why I'm here. I'm passionate about it. I don't want to see us lose members because we're losing classes and losing.
Well, and
That's
what
the bottom
I'm
line.
trying to separate is what's administrative and what's in the contract in the city of Madison and the state. And I've meetings, as you well know, and so here, and I'm not disagreeing at all. But what I want to make is the thing how they're administering. We're discussing and we have on right now is the actual agreement
I
between the
understand
city
that.
and the state and is not a part of that discussion.
Okay,
But you're coming in.
I
sharing your
came here to be heard. And I thank you for listening to me. Are there any other, before I start back again?
I guess I'll make a comment. I think tying some of this together, the concern that Jenny's had and the other members as well is the voice of the members. And I think that kind of ties to changes she's referenced and questions from the commissioners as well. I think that the advisory committee still serves as a vehicle for any kind of feedback, because we want the voice from members, we want the voice from whoever those appointees are, and I think generally in all cases they are members, to be able to any change or they would like, and I think that still serves as that vehicle to have the members' voices at the table.
Mhm. And I feel as a board, some of our requests, some of our ideas were not being heard. They were overlooked.
And again, please bring those concerns, to the advisory committee. Because they bring it then to the governing committee, and then administrative. Things in that are decision by the administrators that are under or are parallel to the advisory board and the governing board, so.
I do plan to attend the meetings when my schedule allows. Just
Very
because
good.
I'm not on the board doesn't mean I'm not gonna show up and
Very good,
voice my opinion. So,
thank you.
anything else?
Yes, please continue to get people involved with the committees that we have. And that because the public representation is very important.
I
to the
completely
operations of the
agree.
city. Thank you.
Have any? This is under consent. Yeah. They did ask briefly, attorney, his recommendation to them was to moving forward and to improve it.
You think about our consent.
No. No, I think we're on a different level than the Board of Regents project. I guess the last note I do want to make known is we've talked a lot about the advisory committee, the governing board, and the director is really the last leg of that and representing all the staff as well. And we certainly appreciate the time that all of the staff, including the director, put in out there, because members are there for good amounts of the day, or maybe not, it's up to their own choice. But we always know we've got a director there 40+ hours a week along with staff as well. So we appreciate all the work that they've been doing.
Yes, and I appreciate the fact that you're gonna have open meetings and allow people to come in and express their concerns. I think that's important.
Any other questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve community center amended and restated cooperative user agreement with Dakota State University.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Number 4, approve the recycling services agreement with Valiant Living. And I'll ask James to address that.
Thank you. I believe it was first meeting in October that we last discussed the recycling service agreement. It is a 2-year contract that is expiring at the end of the month of January and currently is with Valiant Living. The city took this out to bid for recycling services, which include operation of the recycling conveyor, sorting of recyclables, and light custodial duties. We had one mission to that, and that was Valiant Living. The price was the previous contract, I'm gonna be rounding these numbers a little bit, was around $60,000 a year, and the new contract was a bit of $120,000 a year. Staff had provided a memo for a few different options to consider at that meeting in October, and ultimately the commission directed staff to negotiate with Valiant Living to attempt to receive a lower bid price. We did have those meetings some time ago, and the negotiated price is $106,244, which would be made in monthly installments of $8,853.67. At this point, it is certainly an increase from what we've had in previous years, but we feel that the operations work pretty smoothly, and staff recommend moving forward with that new contract price. Gary, anything to add? Okay.
Questions or comments?
Thank you for working that out with us, by the way.
We certainly appreciate the relationship with them and would be happy to see it continue.
I make a motion to approve recycling services agreement with Valiant Living.
One second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 5, approval of the 2023-27 capital improvement plan. And again, do you want to address that, Jameson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this would be a 5-year capital improvement plan. We engage with the engineering company ISG to help us coordinate this and look for improvements that they would recommend, as well as bring all together the items from staff of all the departments. So I've handed out to the commissioners the final plan. It's a lengthy document. The document that was posted in the agenda packet is cut down quite a bit for ease of access. Primarily, if you want to see what's listed for the next 5 years, that'd be Appendix B is a good way to look at it. The total number for the next 5 years that is included in this plan is about $66 million. That is a large number. I do want to note that 18 million of that is for the SRF projects. 8 million is planned for this new city hall and police station, and 4.7 million is for creek wall repairs. With certainly some large projects that take up a lot of that number. We also want to budget conservatively, so some of the projects in there, I believe we can likely achieve for a much lower cost, but we want to budget conservatively rather than be surprised in the end. There's also a number of items that we made sure to include that typically I wouldn't classify as a capital item. They are recurring items and more falling under general operation. but we decided to put them in there for clear transparency and for some discussion. These are items that we haven't done in the past, but we would be doing moving forward, and since it's a new item, we put it in there. One example there would be chip sealing, which previously we were able to implement together with Lake County, and this year we contracted it out, and we expect to continue to do so, and so that's about $300,000 a year. So since that's kind of a new item, we wanted to make sure to call out that in the capital improvement plan. 5 years from now, if we're looking at doing a new plan, a lot of those items you wouldn't see in there as well. So just a few reasons why some of that number might seem inflated. And now in the last couple of years, our capital budget's probably been around 20 million. So when you take 20 times 5, we have a lot of capital projects going on, and $66 million can go a long way to get a lot of things done, but we know it's not a small investment either. That's a broad level view. I would stand by for any questions.
Questions or comments?
When did we start this? How long? Roughly.
Yeah, it has been a long process. It was mid-year of 2021. And we realized pretty quickly along with ISG that it was a bigger undertaking than they had expected. And once they were able to put an initial draft in front of my eyes, I think it was a springtime, and that's just a difficult time of the year. So ultimately, we weren't able to get a final draft before you until then.
So a while.
Yeah. I'll say a month and a half, or a year and a half. I wish it was a month and a half.
And keep in mind in that, when we put together a plan like this, everything is subject to change depending on what's going on. But it is a vision for the future.
I would suggest, because it's a vision for the future, that the correct motion is to acknowledge it, not approve it.
Good. And
I
with
imagine
that,
once it's acknowledged or approved tomorrow, it'll probably be outdated, but it's the best we can do for today. And I would imagine we would revisit this plan every year right before the budget to make sure that we're looking at the next year's capital improvements and staying up to date with what we need to do.
That's good directional focus for us.
Okay,
I'll make a motion to acknowledge the 2023 through 27 capital improvement plan.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 6, approved proposal from PASC, and I'd have to look up what the title stands for that, but anyway, it's just Strategic Planning Services, and I'm gonna let Jameson go ahead and discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So now that we've got a capital improvement plan behind us, we believe the next vision creating activity that'd be useful for the city is a strategic plan. We had reached out to various firms and received 3 proposals back for strategic planning services. In communication with Commissioner Shaw, we ultimately bring to you the proposal from PASC. This is a rural economic development agency that focuses on different strategy initiatives such as this one. They're proposing assistance in creating a 3-year strategic plan. They would put together a steering committee of local stakeholders and intend to have the plan finished by May 1st of 2023. This process would also include various community feedback through surveys, as well as focus groups and listening sessions. And total cost for the services is estimated at $21,280.
Questions or comments?
And that was bid out, correct?
Yeah,
We send out requests for proposal informally, since it's underneath the bid limit, there's no requirement to have a bid opening or bid process, and we did receive multiple bids, and this would be the one that we recommend with. It is also happened to be the lowest cost.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve proposal from PASC for strategic planning services not to exceed $22,000.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have any public comment on that? Nothing. Okay, seeing no public comment under announcements, we do have board openings on the community center board. 1 vacancy with 1 year remaining on the term. And then our next regular commission meeting will be Tuesday, January 3rd at 5:30 p.m. And at this time, do we have a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. We are in executive session. Thank you, everyone, for attending.